Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Orange Card, Blue Card. I am, of course, Sam Tate from Ace Maneuvers. I'm joined by David Toombs from Let's Talk Universes. And David, let's talk about the Atlanta Regional. That's got to be the topic that is on everybody's mind. That has to be the number one thing going on in Universes right now. There's been a lot of cool previews and spoilers and lots of things coming out with like challenger decks. But right now, the focus is on competitive play because this is probably your last chance to get qualified for nationals. This is your last chance to get that sweet, sweet qualification for worlds by winning a regional. And this is the last official competitive event until nationals, which is, I think, 3-4 months away. So if you want to get that competitive itch in and in an official capacity, you're going to have to do it this weekend.
Yeah, this is the last US event for the year. For 2024. This is it. We have the next webcam circuit event will be in November. The webcam circuit championship will be in December. But as far as officially sanctioned events, this is it. So it feels this is already from signups the largest regional of the year. We're at 135 signups currently. I suspect that we'll hit over 150 players, which is pretty solid. I think our biggest regional last year was about 164. Maybe 200 at Gen Con. But it really just kind of spiked up for nationals when we got to like 400 something players. But we were having like regionals at like 70, 80 players last year. So 135 right now, pretty good. This is going to be a good going out with a bang. It's also the last event before Dark Hero Challenger deck comes out. It's the last event before Paul Phoenix. And these Tekken 8 promo characters are out. So the UK and the Oceania regionals are going to look very different from the US regionals. It's kind of a funny scheduling thing going on this month where US is going to look very different from the other regions. So this is kind of like the only event for this competitive format. And I think it's going to be I guess might be jumping ahead of myself, but you're commentating, right?
Yeah. I'll be there in a commentary capacity. That's probably how it's going to be for me for the rest of this year. I don't think I'm qualified for nationals yet. If my local qualifiers, if there's enough of them, I do want to make the attempt to play at nationals. But I also don't want to give up the spot to commentate worlds in case I fail. And that's always been the deciding factor for me is like, I want to take the guaranteed participation if I can, unlike year one, where we had 2 different nationals. So I got to like split the difference where I could commentate one and then play in the webcam nationals. That hasn't been an opportunity. So I want to play next year a lot more, but this year we only had 3 opportunities. And so I decided to end up doing commentary for each of them.
Yeah, the 3 opportunities is something big because I feel it. Like, okay, so today's Thursday night. I'll be packing all night, traveling all day tomorrow. I'll get in around 8 p.m. Our Airbnb is 15 minutes away. There's going to be 15 of us staying at this Airbnb. It's I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to sleep or if it's going to be too loud. How this is exactly going to work out, but I'm already starting to feel the nerves because to me, I put a lot of pressure on myself in these events that not only for the world's points when we only have 3 major events and I'm somebody with only 1 local. So these major regionals are a big deal to do well. So I put a lot of pressure on myself there, but also I feel like that I have to do well as a content creator because if I go and go 0-3 scrub, nobody's going to listen to my content anymore. Like I have to do well.
That was actually, I hate to say, that was a big benefit to playing in year one in the first year for MHA is I felt like I did really well for that first year and people cared about results a lot more. And Tam did really well. Tam won a couple regionals, or I guess a provisional, not a regional, either way, and like once you've banked a little bit of success, it goes a long way. And I think people who play enough card games realize that to fully win an event of any substantial size, you have to have your luck match your skill. You know, there's a lot
Mhm.
of great players out there. There's a lot of players who I think are definitely good enough to win a regional, and they either are handicapping themselves by playing something that they really like more than that they know is really good. And they could still win a regional with those decks they really like. It's just I just hear so many, bad luck stories, so many bad beats, so many bubble outs from like one or two losses, and it always just boils down to win more. You just have to win more, and
Mhm.
then all the little like I'm the biggest complainer of tiebreakers, but if I just win more, I don't have to worry about them, right? So when I find out that like I know someone who's playing the same deck as me and they have like a completely different record than me, even though we practiced together and I probably was inspired to play the deck because of them. But I look back at my matches and you can see it on stream. Almost every time I'm in a stream game, my opponent like gives me some amazing opportunity. Like in the last webcam event, I played against George Zhang and he didn't cancel a true 100% Unleashed. I didn't realize he could cancel it until like the next card was played. Like when he realized it, I realized it, and stuff like that. So I look at things like that and I'm just like, I still lost that match, by the way. I picked a 3 later, so karma got me. But the point is that there's a lot of great players out there, and you just gotta have one day where your luck rises to meet your skill, and it takes both to win an event. But the better you are, the more opportunities you will have for luck to bail you out, is kind of how I feel. And the less you rely on it at the same time. So it's really kind of this double-edged sword where the better you get at the game, the less you need the luck and the more opportunities you'll have for luck to help you out, right? So that kind
Mhm.
of uh gives you an exponential effect when things kind of go your way. And it just breaks my heart because there's players who have been playing for years now and they play like a cool deck, they play a sweet deck, they've worked on it over and over, and they've maybe made like one top cut with it, and they're always like bubbling out and they're always grinding and they play way more than like me, for example, and they just don't really get the credit that they deserve as like admittedly a journeyman player. I'm not saying like these are Hall of Famers or nothing, but it
Yeah.
just sucks because people care so much about results and they care less about the process. And I think being a YouTuber, being a content creator, people get the opportunity to see the process a lot more, and that's where you can find value in the work rather than just worrying about like, oh well, why would I listen to this guy, he doesn't ever win anything, right? Why would it's like, why would you listen to a coach, he's never played? It's kind of that mentality. It doesn't You don't have to have those results, but I understand it. It definitely helps.
Yeah, and I feel like I've gotten enough results to where I can be trusted, but I haven't spiked an event yet. Like I
Yeah.
haven't like for example, like Tam won that webcam event. Tam won the provisional with Momo. I think you won one at early MHA, right? With Denki. Did you win one?
No, I made a bunch of top cuts. I never even made like a top 4 until a webcam top 8 event. So like that's what I'm saying though,
Oh,
is like
nice.
I made top 8 at the first provisional. And like people cared so much at that very beginning that it got the ball rolling for me. And it helped probably that like I topped that event and a lot of my content was talking about um like traditional values from the game. Not all of it panned out, mind you, because the game definitely changed. But a lot of it
Yeah.
was in the very first year of MHA. There was a lot of old heads trying to convince new players, like, no, trust us, your deck ratios should be not 50-50, and like, you should not be attacking turn 1 back when that was legal. Like, it's not a good opportunity unless you have like very specific combos. And people would like play Tokoyami, try to do a 5 diff, turn 1 going second, and try to pick up a summon Dark Shadow and like play 2 attacks. And so there was a lot of fundamental, like, hey, I've been around the block kind of stuff that helped me out. But if I had to guess, if it's anything, it was actually just like topping the first 2 events.
Yeah. And then your name just kind of gets known. That's when we had the boom of players.
That's
Yeah, I just
that's what helped Levi a lot. Like if you look back at it, for that first year with Levi's content, it's a lot of deck profiles. But the one that stands out, the one that like starts it all, is that he made top 4 playing Kirishima, right? And in his own deck profile, he's like, I'm really new to this game, but like this character just seems broken, you know? And he was just like very honest and stuff. And so people, they really did cling to like those first provisional results, and like that kind of stuff really helped early players boom. Now it seems to be like previews are what matters. I see a substantial spike in my growth and in my viewership around the time of like preview season, whenever I get exclusive previews, whenever stuff was leaked back in the day, and like they didn't have us on NDAs and they didn't have like a relationship, so there's like no reason not to talk about stuff that got leaked, right? That seems to be like a huge part of growth now, more so than tournament results.
Yeah, we have more new products coming than tournaments. So
yeah, exactly.
I think that kind of what it boils down to. We have like just this month, you know, I mean, we've got the Dark Hero coming out, the Tekken Clash decks, we got
lower decks.
Lower decks coming out. I think they're going to start Attack on Titan season or set 2 reveals here pretty soon. Like I think October is just going to be like reveal season throughout.
Yeah.
At the same time as being tournament season.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I guess if we want to talk like content creator meta is right now. I've been doing a lot of like technique and tips videos, but it's still like the same 100 people watching all my videos. You know, I don't know how much it's like reaching newer players, and like if people show their friends, but they're showing it to them like on their phone and they're not like clicking and getting the subscriber, you know what I mean? Like it's, or they're like sharing it in a Discord, you know, they're not like going to my channel, stuff like that. It can be really difficult to like track that and like worry about that. But I think for the most part, you know, at least my mentality for content creation is you gotta just interact with the parts you enjoy. You know, everything that comes with it is just extra, right? Everything that's I don't know. I don't get like negative comments, so people are really nice in this community. I'd probably feel different if I was doing this for like Star Wars or Yu-Gi-Oh, and people were just commenting, "You're an idiot," like on every video I do. So maybe it's different.
I feel like our game is like, in terms of growth, we have really stagnated this year. Maybe even lost some. It feels like we've got like a core 100 to 200 players. We've been around for a year plus. I don't know many new ones that have come in and I mean, like Calvin is relatively new, but he was in Vegas. Not Calvin, the Harrigal, Kevin.
Calvin Harrigal, he topped Collinsville.
Yeah, he's topped both regional. So we got some new like new names here putting up some results, but like I feel like we've kind of like, what would you say, crystallized around a core group of players.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Is that a female Titan reference?
Crystallized?
Yeah, that might be I guess that might be a spoiler. Yeah. I don't know. It kind of feels like it was before the pandemic, before the reboot, where there's like a core group of maybe 100 to 200 players. It's probably bigger than it was still. But it feels like there's like a core group of invested players, and you kind of get to know them all via their online handle, whatever. And they're still separated into little pockets. Only now it's like, you know, which Discord do you primarily post in, right? It's like which content creators Discord do you post in, or like which channels do you follow? Because you'll see a lot of people post in like deck building channels, but I never talk in deck building channels. I just take everything to general. Because I feel like deck building discussions, people get like super nitpicky about like, why don't you run this one or two of, and like they're not really like suggesting anything that helps your strategy 90% of the time. They're asking why you're not playing some staple that you obviously had to cut to make room for like a new idea. So I just get like bogged down with like ones and twos a lot with those discussions. Like you won't see me in those channels a lot. And there's a few people that I don't talk to because they only talk in those channels. And pre-reboot, it was like that, but it was regional. There's like different regions had like different Facebook groups, and uh, there was multiple like North American Facebook groups, and like that was just how we talked before Discord. We had the Las Vegas. There's two different Las Vegas Facebook groups because the admin for one like just ditched it, right? So we had to make a new one. It's stuff like that, and you would have people who like cross promote, and there's definitely people who are not from Vegas in the Vegas one because people want to stay connected and just check out what's going on. But you still have like a little bit of cliques and bubbles and cultures and different things like that, different teams. Now we got teams, right? We didn't have so many teams before. If you had a team, it was like for a tournament, it was just people. But it feels very much like we're in that same place where there's a core group of people. We all kind of know each other. You recognize people by name, and then there's like a second hemisphere of like ultra casuals who will pop in to actually play the game like once in a blue moon, and they play it maybe like one event a year that's close to them, and other than that, like they're just not involved, they're not that invested, they're not buying a bunch of product. And that's kind of how it was before. There was a lot of people who were like not talking about the game, they didn't jump in online discussions, they weren't doing like deep dive deck building, but they were still like fans of the game and friends of people who played. So they'd show up at an event, and you'd get your event to go from like the core group of like 15 to 20 people who care a lot to like 45 people at most for like a PTC, which was our regionals before. And I feel that. I feel like we have like a core group of like 100 invested players, and then we get that spin-off of like half that group that gets us to 150 at an event. So it's definitely grown, just from those examples alone. We've tripled in size. But
yeah,
at the same time, it kind of feels like old UFS never broke that bubble. Old UFS never beat that dynamic. At our majors, we got to 150 people once, and that was like a huge deal. That was like a big deal that we were more, like way more than 100 people back in the day. So it's really tough to feel like we're in that same place now when there's so much new stuff coming out and there's so many great opportunities to get people like into the game. But I know people who have joined the game, they play at their locals, and they're on the grind, but because they started halfway through the year, they feel like there's no reason to go to a regional. They feel like there's no reason to go to nationals when they're a brand new player, and they'd have to pay to travel all the way to Dallas because like they've won a local qualifier, right, or a local championship, and they qualified for Nats, but they're so far behind in a points race, and they're so new, and the focus of nationals is competitive play, that they're just like waiting for next year as well. They're waiting for like an opportunity to play at like something more than just the same 4 or 5 people at locals, and they just don't really have that opportunity, and it's tough.
Yeah, we don't have the pricing right now to justify it at the moment unless you're going for the world's points. You need those championship points.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
I was looking through
this is what I'm saying, right? Like we need new players, we need casuals, we need the people we need that extra 50% of non-invested players to feel like it's worth it to go and effectively scrub out, because I've had my locals went to nationals the first 2 years, and this year they're skipping it, even though they're all qualified, they all have the time off. But it wasn't a big deal because they didn't. I don't want to say they didn't feel like they could top, or they just know that it hasn't happened before, right? They haven't topped events before, so for them it's not. It's too big of a risk because the bottom end of the casual player, of the player who's just shooting their shot, gets so little in return. And I don't know how you solve that, because I feel like competitive events are not for that type of player, but we're so reliant on that type of player is kind of what I'm getting at. We are so reliant on that non-invested or that ultra casual or that extra 50% of players who don't necessarily think they have a great shot at topping, but they would love to take a chance. They just can't justify, the weekend in Dallas this time after doing it for 2 years and kind of coming away with The Excited for Blood promos, those were good, right? Oh no, those were cheaper than
Yeah.
the ultra rare, actually. I don't know. So that's kind of my
Yeah,
point
we
is we're relying on that casual sect to buff our numbers, but we like don't have anything for them at these events.
yeah, and so I was looking through the 150 135 players currently signed up, and it was like, oh my gosh, I think 80 of these 135 players are like really good. You know, like these are names I recognize. Like this is going to be a very difficult, like even though it's a large event, it's actually going to be very difficult. Like there's not going to be many times where I get paired into somebody and I don't recognize their name, because typically when I get paired into somebody and I don't recognize their name, I do a little cheer inside because it's like, nice, you know. Maybe this will be a little bit easier of a matchup. Uh
It's wrong, but I know that feeling.
yeah, it's
It
like,
I know what's really funny is I can remember seeing that look on other people's faces when they would sit down and they'd be like, "Oh, hey, hi, who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Sam. I've been playing the game for 6 months." And they're like, and I can see the look on their face, the predator eyes that come out, you know, the snake eyes as they're trying not to smile. They're smiling with their eyes, right? And then I flip over my character and I'm playing like the most disgusting character in the format. I'm playing like the most unfun control deck. And then after the game, I'm like, but I was taught by multiple time world champion Shane Duckworth, and he built my deck for me. You know? Like my first worlds, I got third place in teams, and the only person I lost to in that entire event was Kevin Broberg twice. And but the whole tournament,
nice.
everyone I played against was like, "Yeah, give me that guy. I don't know who he is."
Because we're just such a small community.
Yeah,
You
it's
just
but it's real. You know, it's very real. So it's wrong because all the Vegas players, the other Vegas team, by the way, got second place, losing only to Kevin Broberg's team. So like the Vegas players were all unknowns at that event, pretty much, and they all came out swinging because we had like really adequate coaching and deck help from one of the game's best players to ever play the game. So who was an employee at the time and he couldn't play. So he was like the guy, you know, Shane Duckworth is a guy who like helped build the Vegas play group. And if he didn't help us be good at the game, I don't know if the Vegas play group would have stuck around because for all intents and purposes, I don't know if we would say that we're like spiky, but there's definitely like a core group of like 6 to 7 people who really wanted to improve at the game and like do well. So you got to be a little careful because you might not recognize someone, but they might just be like Garrett Brett's friend, you know?
yeah. Or maybe they are amazing. They just never had the funds to travel or something, and
Yeah,
and
the
they
the the most common thing is there's an old head who's only going to go to one event a year, and you will have never heard of them. If they don't tell you their Discord name, you probably won't know who they are, you know? And they probably
yeah.
won't be playing like a serious deck anyways at that level, but you definitely got to be careful. There's definitely some sharks in the water. After like round 2 or 3, they probably drop to go do something else, but for those first couple rounds, you gotta watch out.
Yeah, my favorite player to play against is the person who has not been to some major competitive events yet, but they've been destroying their locals,
Yeah,
you know?
they
And
get the
then
reality check.
because I feel like Universes, there's such a big competitive gap between locals and major events that it'll be like, oh yeah, this deck just dominates my locals, and then you take it to the regional, and it's not gonna fly anymore.
Can I tell you a personal anecdote really quick of a time when I didn't necessarily get punished for this, although I ended up not topping that event, because my deck was bad. But a weird example of this kind of thing is actually the first time I ever met Travis Tangeman. He was like a name I'd not really heard of. I think I had seen the name because he has a pretty unique name, right? And on you know, on Facebook when you like read out the name and stuff like that, like it's a pretty unique name. So I might have recognized the name just from like seeing him post and talk about the game. but I had definitely never met him. We had never played. And when I sat down, he was playing Bakugo 2. And so I had that moment where I'm like, oh, dude, this character is not good. I'm playing the life symbol. I have 3 Faith Shield in my main board. This guy's never going to combo anything. It's like round 1 or 2. So, I think we're both like 1-0 or something like that. And I'm like, I have that exact feeling where I'm like, oh, this guy probably kills his locals with giant, powerful 5 moves and flips their whole stage, whatever. And this deck is probably sweet as hell. But there is no chance in hell I would ever play this deck or this character in this format because Faith Shield had just come out. This was the Vegas regional, the first ever Vegas regional for the reboot. And set 2 had just dropped. It was the first set 2 event, right? And so the thing I forgot to put in my Ochako 1 deck was Back Alley Haymaker. Because I just didn't like that it wasn't a high attack, I think. I didn't value it, and I didn't own any. Because the set had just come out. And so I didn't play it, and didn't think I needed it. But that was a huge mistake. But the point is when I played Travis, I just was lucky enough to draw Faith Shield every turn. He between release and encouraging training partner, I was always going to be able to block with Faith Shield. And I felt like the match was just very easy. His deck didn't get to do anything either game. It was not a fair matchup, right? I had all the counter pieces. And I walked away from it going, that poor guy probably just got like a reality check, And then it turns out he's one of the best players in the game, has some of the best results at tournaments, has done way better at pretty much every other tournament than me, And he turned around and he went from playing a deck that I would have never picked for that format to playing like the best deck in like every format pretty much. And also, experimenting with really cool different decks like Hawks and Recovery Girl. So it's just funny how those kind of things can happen, because I know that feeling that you're talking about. And like with Travis, like in that 1 Iota, it worked out for me. But history shows that he's the better player, right? So it's very funny how that kind of stuff can turn out.
Yeah, and I'm positive that happened. I mean, in my first several events, like I played Mount Lady for a webcam provisional and got some wins, but also got some terrible losses. I'm positive. Or like Nomu, like when Jose just destroyed me at US Nationals. I'm sure it was a similar thing of, oh yeah, I just gave him a reality check. Like that Nomu destroys locals, but it's not gonna fly here, once you start getting to the top 20 tables at a 300-person event.
It's really easy too.
But yeah, I worked on it.
It's really easy too when someone flips over like an off-meta character or like a character you don't respect. It's very easy to not only underestimate a deck, but also, how do I put it? It's just, I think it's just really easy to underestimate like a character choice, especially in the early days where it's like, okay, well, you're playing Cement Toss, right? And like this is not a deck that's had like great performances, and there's not really like a lot to know about the deck, but if it's just playing all the good Earth staples, it's still just like a really good Earth deck. You know what I mean? And so I think especially in like a locals environment, you can play like the off-meta character just with all the good stuff. Like when Evil first got Vile Seizing and Evil and Death had like a major glow up in League of Villains, it felt like you could play like any Death character or any Evil character. Even though the meta answer, the meta choice was pretty much always Shigaraki 3. There was a lot of people playing a lot of different Evil and Death decks, and I would go to like webcam tournaments and be like, oh man, this is gonna be like really easy. And then they play all the good Evil cards, and it's actually still really frustrating, So
yeah,
it's tough when your locals deck is like killing it. Like I think Death Arms is probably the perfect example of like a deck that everyone who plays Death Arms at their locals like runs roughshod over their locals. Now that It Can't Be Fixed is gone, and people don't have like the insanely good stun hate, people are super confident in their Death Arms decks, and then you see them on stream and you see them at tournaments, and they almost always just completely crap the bed. And I think they've only made top cuts a couple times, like 2 times as Death Arms made a top cut, and I don't think it's won a top cut match, right? So it's little stuff like that where I go, oh, this character is not what I would pick for this event, but I'm sure that they like kill their locals with it.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good example that of right now. So to kind of transition to like the meta for Atlanta, like you could take any number of characters and slam Risky Encounter and City Rampage into it, and then it's like, ooh, this is actually doing pretty well, you know. And but like it's not necessarily the character. It's just that these are the broken cards, and you're combining them together, and or like combined firepower and Risky Encounter, like Toga 1, you know. I think Toga 1 is probably going to be a pretty popular pick for a dark horse.
Yeah.
To go back to I'll fill up my card pool with combined firepowers and riskies, and then I can finish off with my alleyway ambushes, and kill them that way. But I'm not sure necessarily that Toga 1 is like, you know, it wasn't in my top 30 characters right now. It's just that, hey, that's a good combined firepower Risky Encounter deck.
Right. Well, that's why I never really liked the tier list stuff, because you can say like this one death character is objectively a better character into the format than Toga 1, but Toga 1 has access to a strategy, you know, like a specific card, a specific strategy that makes the deck feel super different and unique. But if you look at the composition, she just swapped out 1 attack for 4 copies of Alleyway Ambush. You know, she's playing like 1 or 2 attacks different than the Aaron Yeager Casino deck. She's playing 1 or 2 attacks different than, you know, any other Twisting Azure Inferno, Death, Mill, Casino, Avoiding the Conflict deck. So it's tough for me to break things down by characters. I much prefer to look at the deck archetypes, but there is usually still like a best character for most of them. It's funny, I'm doing a bingo card. I'm gonna put out a bingo card tomorrow on a video, and City Rampage, and like her form with City Rampage and form with Risky Encounter are both like on there in the same row. So I probably have to like jumble that up a bit, because I imagine there's gonna be quite a few City Rampage Risky Encounter decks. But I'm curious, what do you think are gonna be the characters most represented playing that strategy? Who's the best City Rampage Risky deck? And what do you think, like, what other characters do you think people are going to try that with?
I honestly think it might. So the best City Rampage and Risky Encounter, I think is Death Arms. But if we just think of like the best Risky Encounter deck, because that is going to be everywhere. Yeah, it could just be Toga. It could just be Toga as the best of the aggro characters.
Okay.
I imagine. I don't know. Why can't I think of others? I think by far, and this is taking us a totally separate direction, but I just think that going into this event, there's a clear boogeyman, and the boogeyman of events is typically a character that a beginner can pick up and easily construct a top tier deck. So younger Toguro was a boogeyman because it was a very easy optimal list. Ojiro 2 was a easy boogeyman because that was very, very clear cut. Kirishima 2 to some extent. Like these characters are you don't have to be amazing at the game to pick them up.
It's so
put in
funny.
the good stuff.
Really quick, I just want to say it's so funny because I would have believed Jiro 1 to be that character
Jiro
wholeheartedly, and yet so many people struggled to play Jiro 1, and even like top level players in grand finals always make a mistake playing Jiro 1. So like I would have pegged Jiro 1 for like beginner friendly, like day one, and yet people always fumble the bag with that character. It was so wild. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that
Well,
out there because
yeah, I'm kind of with you. So your Jiro is like my Mirio. Like Mirio would be like one of those things where like a beginner should be able to do well in Mirio, but for some reason, every time I play Mirio, I top cut, and all the other Mirios aren't making it. And so it's like you guys are fumbling how to play Mirio. You know,
wasn't
clearly you're
there
zeroing out the wrong things. You're not
wasn't there
doing
an
something
event
right.
wasn't there an event where there was like four Mirios and Top Cuts and they all just played different attack lineups up to and
Yeah, that
including
was
a
the very
no back
first.
alley haymaker, and there was one guy playing BMI Buster with all the momentum ramp he could.
Yeah, that was the very first webcam regional
Yeah,
um
I think
on of Mirio.
I think Mirio still fits that category, but I do think that they built in the counterplay for Mirio, like in that set, right? Like cooperation offer went
Yeah.
huge. People started playing that as like a 3 of 4 of, and people were. I know I was all over the life symbol, and like life and void became the meta like right after. So I feel like that's like a format warping character where Mirio was beginner friendly, but all the experienced players warped their decks so hard that an inexperienced player couldn't do it. Like we watched a Mirio. I'm
Yeah.
not saying this was an inexperienced player playing Mirio, but we did watch a Mirio deck get milled out in grand finals in the UK regional, right? So like I think Mirio fits, but I get your point where everyone techs so hard against Mirio, which I feel like right now that's Smiling Titan. That's the most format warping character for sure. It's gotta
Yeah,
be.
that's where I was getting to. Is Smiling fits the bill of Jiro, Nomu, Mirio, Younger, Ojiro 2, like fits that exactly. A beginner player picks up Smiling Titan and they should be able to just steamroll people. And
Yeah.
so that's the character that I think you have to be prepared for because like Eraserhead 2 or no, sorry, Eraserhead, Momo 1, those characters were like clearly maybe even the best characters in set one, but those were never like the boogie people. I don't even know how to say it, boogeyman of the format, um, because somebody new isn't just picking up the deck and destroying someone with it. Um, it's going to take a little more deck building finesse maybe and understanding the counterplay between your deck and your opponent's deck. So um, yeah, Smiling Titan is that character right now, and I feel like you have to be Smiling Titan just crushes you unless you have an answer to it.
Yeah.
And
So Smiling
um
Titan, the thing that makes a character like beginner friendly, or well, I'll even just put it out there, the character that can carry you is the one where
mhm,
the lines don't differentiate, and they're the ones that ask questions and force the rival to have the answer. The Smiling Titan decks, they can play around resets and give like 4/4 to something, but that's not really what you care about. I don't think many Smilings are, there's very few situations where you're like, well, if I give it 4 speed after Barrier Shield, this matters, right? It's very rare. Not really how
yeah.
they build the decks. And so, yeah, Smiling is a deck where you don't really have to do much, but you're going to ask a question, and it's completely up to the rival to figure it out.
Yeah, you're putting all the pressure on your rival. And then the Smilings they they know that they don't have defense and that's the weakness. And so they play all their foundations as defense. It's like it's very similar to Younger, I feel like
Yeah.
in the builds where it like they play all 4x invincible body, 4x Keikoze. They're playing like all of this defense because they're just trying to get an extra turn to throw out a few massive attacks at you that you can't that hey, if you didn't draw the answer, maybe you drew the answer last turn, but maybe now you didn't this turn. Um,
That's
so
basically how
so
good Giro 1 decks were. If you made a good Giro 1 deck, it was probably like all the card advantage stuff, and then like release and speed hate and throw hate was like your whole deck.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this time it's just these invincible bodies, which like you have to be. So a lot of people say, well, just kill Smiling, just kill him. It's like, well, they're so defensive that it's very difficult to do. you not only have to be aggro, you have to be extreme aggro. You have to be extreme aggro with answers to their stage. Like any stage answer right now in an aggro deck, I think is very important. Like Ice Sword Execution, take down your invincible bodies, or you know, take down the Keiko's aids. You gotta have something to hit their stage of the Smilings a lot of the time for your aggro to pay off. Otherwise, you're just leaving yourself wide open to be killed on their next turn. Yeah, so I think Smiling is warping the format to where you either have to play a wall deck that has answers to it, or you have to play like not just an aggro deck, but like an extreme aggro deck.
Yeah, I think what's really frustrating is a lot of the ones I'm playing against, not only are they playing Invincible Body, but they're also playing Meeting Hanji. And that's a 3 diff that lets you draw 2 cards if you have no cards in hand. It's super Botons. And they can play them because they only have 4 checks in the deck, right? And so they can reliably play like these crazy good defensive cards. They get access to Struggling with Studies if you're building the Death version, which most of the ones I see are Death with, you know, the life attuned card draw. So they're playing their whole hand every turn. They're building to 1,000,000 as soon as possible. And then to get through them, you have to go through some of the best defensive staples that have existed for years. You know, they have access to Genkai's Guidance plus Struggling with Study. So if they build to way too into Deadlock, they can get out of it very easily and wipe 2 of your attacks. You have to put together a string to kill them because they have so much health, and like you said, the Invincible Body is like a huge 4x in this deck. And they just reduced the game down to like very simple answers. I like to call it Rocket Tag, because in Rocket Tag it takes like 1 hit, right? It's like the one interaction point in Rocket Tag is all that matters. And in Rocket Tag, you don't even have to be that precise. You just got to be pretty close. And I feel like that's where Smiling Titan really feels bad, is Smiling Titan wins so many close games. There's so many games where the sacrifice one on Ravages takes me from a 5 build to a 4 build. And now the best I can check is, even with a 6, I can commit up to a 10 or an 11, you know, and now I miss by 1 even if I check a 6. And so Smiling Titan takes you just out of the realm of possibilities so often. And because of unexpected outcomes, and because of Genkai's Guidance, and because of Ravages of War, you can't play the same style of game that they do. You can't play your whole hand unless you have Meeting Hanji, unless you have like Invincible Bodies, and it's just very annoying that it almost feels like to beat the Smiling you have to play the same way. But I have it on pretty good authority from a lot of people that in the Smiling Titan mirror, the first player advantage is astronomical. So that's not even necessarily a race you want to be doing. You know, that's not even like a conformity that you want to make, because then you're pretty much leaving it up to a dice roll. You're leaving it up to a coin flip of who goes first. So definitely number 1 on everyone's mind, and the most like obvious out the gate character to warp the format is Smiling Titan. What I'm hoping is that because people warp their decks so heavily, just like Mirio, that we see a huge decrease, because I think Smiling has some really bad matchups, and they're probably the most format warping characters from pre-AOT, and I gotta put King Ghidorah on this. King Ghidorah is a character that requires unique answers, modifies the way you play the game, it modifies the way you structure your offense to make sure that you're doing meaningful damage, and it's one of the funniest matchups with Smiling Titan. Smiling Titan actually loses quite a bit of damage over the course of a game, because King Ghidorah gets rewarded so much more than other characters for partial blocking her attacks and taking, you know, 6 or 7 damage. Blocking a Colossus Titan attacks and taking 8 damage and going down to 2, totally acceptable for King Ghidorah. Way different for a character that goes from 30 health to 22 health and then gets killed by you know, the next two attacks or something like that. Whereas King Ghidorah, you'd still have to hit him 3 times, right? So yeah, I think King Ghidorah is up there. He's got some of the best symbols coming out of Attack on Titan. With the way Attuned works, you get like all the best death cards on either of his builds. He's got all the Smiling Titan answers across 3 symbols. I think Decoy Duplicate is a, I'll say, underrated card. It's tough because Ravages kills that momentum that you would get early, and like Smiling Titan's so early focused. But I think King Ghidorah is definitely up there because similar to Smiling Titan, you have to kind of restructure the way you do things. And if you, just like Smiling Titan, if you commit out, King Ghidorah is very, very good at punishing. Very rarely misses a kill turn when the opportunity arises because of that powerful E-commit ability. So it forces you to play honest in a very dishonest matchup.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw King Ghidorah was half of top 4 in St. Louis, and now it's possibly the most obvious answer to the character everybody's teching for. King Ghidorah also gets true 100%, which is just a free block on any of the mid attacks that a Smiling plays.
Huge deal. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, not only do you get that answer on face, but one of your best attacks that if you're playing Evil Ghidorah, which I think, like, I know the Void version is popular, but I think Evil Ghidorah is probably the most common still, just to get access to true 100%. So there's just 4 easy answers that you have in your deck. Yeah, Ghidorah feels like I still think, to me personally, I think Rodan is just the best character in the game.
Okay.
But because Ghidorah is such a good answer to Smiling, that might push Ghidorah's chances in Atlanta above Rodan, because Rodan is, in my experience, playing the Void version. Now I know the All version gets like Defending Pageant Queen and things to help out, but like playing the Void version, like
you get more.
You really want to see like Barrier Shield, but then the Smilings can Koan Task it, because a lot of the best players on Smiling are almost like mainboarding Koan Task, because they know that Barrier Shield, Genkai's Guidance, and the like, referee jury, yeah, that these are going to be like a lot of people's most common answers to the Smiling game plan. So if they can take that down, then hey, Rodan saying -3 speed, you're still probably not going to block 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, Rodan on Void is one of the few characters that can just block the attacks without spending like a finite resource other than, you know, removing the 1 card for the character ability. So it's definitely up there. I don't know how, it's tough because I don't know how warping Rodan is, because it doesn't feel like a specific style of offense works against him. You just kind of have to hope that they have clunky hands, right? Like when I played Rodan at the last webcam event, I talked a lot in my videos about learning from that and like what mistakes I made, and you know, I sacrificed a little bit of overall card advantage for like a more consistent version of the deck. You know, I played a smaller version than a lot of people, and that came back to hurt me at one point. So it's tough because it's so easy to lose with Rodan by making 1 bad decision or checking bad 1 time. Like, I mean, the commentary for the webcam didn't understand why I drew the last card in my deck instead of getting the +1/+1 from like a double jumbo fist or something. And the answer is because that last card in my deck was an attack. Because I used Rodan and I looked at 4 cards and it was 3 attacks and 1 non-attack, right? So I lost my discard pile, I had to cycle, and then I still checked a 3 even after that. There's one point in the match where I check 5 or 6 attacks in a row. I look at the top 2, it's 2 attacks. I check through both of them. I then check 2 more attacks after I checked an attack on my first attack to look at the top 2. So it's tough because you don't want to act like, you don't want to say like this character is not format warping because they might have bad luck or whatever. But I don't know what you can do. What can you do to like counteract Rodan? How can you warp your deck to beat Rodan when he's got zone changing defensively? He's got omni block potential now with Mikasa defeats the female Titan. He's got some of the better stun hate on Void. So I
people
do
think like, people think like, okay, I can't beat him through speed. I can't beat him through
zone change. You can't beat him with throws.
Okay, so
he's got the best throw hate in the game. He's got the most throw hate.
Yeah, it's like you cannot play throws when the good Rodans are playing Dimensional Sphere. Mikasa defeats the female Titan, which all the Rodans get, even the all version and the Void versions, because it's era tuned. So just all the Rodans get that free block. And they get like Genkai's guidance.
And they get Will of Steel, and they get detailing the plan on all, and they have Rodan
there's so much throw hate. I feel like the way you beat Rodan. Now, this was my experience as Amajiki in the last set. That the way that Rodan just kind of dunks on string decks because they're so efficient at decreasing the speed. They have such good card economy, especially if they can just like incubate and remove the supersonic flight and draw a card, and then they can like look at the top four and like they're choosing the card that they draw to get the best block zone or the best defensive trick. I feel like what you have to do against Rodan is you have to go big. You have to send out like a 20 speed, 20 damage move. But like, and that's what I thought made George's Rodan list so good in the last set, was that he was 4Xing Barrier Shield, whereas a lot of other Rodans were just ignoring Barrier Shield.
Wow.
And it was like,
that's so
because
wild.
they had so much speed hate, but it's like, you have to recognize like your weakness as Rodan is the bomb attack. But at the same time, the deck's running the bomb attacks. Everybody is running defense towards that because of Smiling Titan.
I saw so many Rodans last format playing one Cape of No Return. Wild. Absolutely wild to me.
Yeah.
The
Rodans have to have something for those big attacks.
I think, and like, man, it's crazy to not run Barrier Shield in Rodan because like he's one of the best spooky users. Because you get the Barrier Shield and then you put it into negative and then you swap it, and it's very hard to bring that damage back. So I can agree that Rodan's one of the best. I don't know if format warping fits here because I do think Hero's upbringing is going to be a much bigger deal. Hero's upbringing is something that you should be playing to seal Rodan. I think Rodan players are going to be doing the enhance. Even on attacks, they don't care about blocking if it ups their attack count, if it gets a bad block off the top. But I agree with the tall strategy, because the number one way I've lost as Rodan, because I didn't do very well playing the all version, was people playing two really big attacks at me, and I just don't have a good check on top of my deck, and I don't have like a +4 block mod on top of my discard pile, and I would like, people would play a 6 high for 9 whirling blade at me. What is it? Was whirling slash? And I was playing against another Rodan, right? And we're like matching each other for the character speed. So I'm still blocking like 6 speed moves. And then they play Death from Above, and it's got 3 speed from whirling slash, and I take 11 from a single Death from Above. And then, the whole game I'm at risk of dying to another singular Death from Above, and if I don't draw Pageant Queen in the all symbol version, I just lose. And that's how I always see Rodans lose. That's how we watched it lose to Elder Toguro in Collinsville. Whenever it loses to Godzilla, it's just because Godzilla finds the right zones on turn 2 and does 18 damage with 2 attacks to it. And that's how Smiling Titan beats Rodan, is you go into your turn 2 and it plays Ravages of War. It puts you down to 1 card in your hand, and because of the instructions on the card, the order in which you do things is dictated by Ravages of War. So you have to have a good card to, I think it's Sacrifice. I have to actually look at this now because this is important.
I think it's Momentum Last, which really screws Rodan because, I mean, if your attack, unless you're playing a lot of 3 block modifier attacks, like normally your attacks have the best block mods.
Right. And that's what keeps happening to me, is I keep ending up with having to put a +1 block mod on top of my discard pile while I'm holding a +1 block mod, but it doesn't matter because an 11 speed move is not something I can block. So I'm taking 12 damage on turn 2, and then for the rest of the game, they just have to hit me one time. You know, even with all that like throw hate that we talked about, you know, a 10 speed Colossus Titan attacks is pretty rough, especially when they can afford to play stuff after it because they checked a 7 on it and they have 11 foundations after turn 2 because they don't have to respect Rodan's offense. That's easily Rodan's, you know, biggest weakness is he's gonna hit you with moves, but he doesn't have access to a lot of big ones. And if Rodan tries to go tall, he is susceptible to the same counterplay, right? If you invest a lot and then he gets barrier shielded, he's back to square one and he's just putting speed on things again. So again,
and the hard thing about Rodan walling up is that if you do wall up, well, the Smiling can just build to 20 foundations and then play a 5 attack string. And so now you might be able to block 2 of those things with a good stage, maybe 3, and then have an answer to something. But like, they can play so many attacks at you that it is difficult. The more time you spend building, Smiling can just match you and just say, okay, I'll just build 2.
That's my biggest issue with, I think, the 4 check attacks in general, is they're always going to have a good early build as long as they draw foundations, which is why it's a little surprising that Smiling Titans don't have the greediest attack ratios, not because they're afraid of checking poorly necessarily, but because they really want to get that good early turn build. And again, cards like Meeting Hanji and Death card draw in general means that they can get through their deck pretty quickly anyways. So also unexpected outcomes like steals an attack from you, right? So it's like 2 attacks in one a lot of the time. And
I think that's a very good Smiling card.
Yeah,
because it's going to force their rival to raw draw the attacks that they need to take you down.
Yeah, it's when I play against Smiling, I'm pressured into throwing my attacks away. If I don't have a great attack turn, I'm still pressured into playing them because unexpected outcomes become such a blowout. So, you know, that's a huge way I lose as Rodan is I don't get to sculpt into Smiling Titan, and while I can block them all day, it's almost, I hate to say it, it's almost like I'm just better off never attacking them.
Yeah, and then if you never attack, like you have to
have to
get to
defend
a point
against
where you can have 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to defend against 3 attacks. Yeah.
Yeah, the foundation that I found the best as Rodan to defend against Smiling is Dash Toward Disaster.
Yeah.
It says commit, discard an attack, gets minus X speed, X equals the speed of the attack, and then you can throw in some very high speed things that like Death from Above, for example. That's a 6 speed attack. So if you play some Death from Aboves, Dash Toward Disaster just says commit for minus 6 speed, and that can get you an extra block. Or you can play some of those 4 check attacks and maybe get like minus 8, minus 7, minus 10 speed.
Rodan's,
and go from there.
Rodan's pretty good at building into the late game and just raw checking them too, and good at scouting ahead to see if it's, you know, even possible. I don't know. I guess Rodan is format warping in the sense that a few of the things people have started to play to. It's so funny. Hero's Upbringing was brought in to stop Mikasa, but it was not enough to stop Rodan because Rodan can just pass his turn offensively and survive. But now Hero's Upbringing is something that you have to clog your own card pool with to try and use it offensively. So I don't know if that's going to be enough, but you know, if you can, and like you'll never hit a Rodan with a Chronostasis trigger. So again, I'm trying to think of if I can consider Rodan format warping, or if the things that are warping the format are just naturally kind of good against Rodan. Because I agree, go big is definitely the way to do it. Play 1 attack and beat his speed is definitely the way to do it. Another character that's good at that is not format warping but should be is Inasa. I think Inasa is like maybe one of the best sleeper picks, but that character should be format warping after this event. I hope to get an Anasa to do well on stream, because that deck is absolutely disgusting with the 4-check archetype, and it's one of the only characters that can rival the speed output of Rodan.
Yeah, that's interesting because I know Dan has been big on it. Daniel Buchanan won my Chrome Beast Titan. He's been big on it, but I'm just not sure anybody else is going to be playing Inasa. So
Yeah, that's
unless you got some you got some the inside scoop that we got some other Inasas coming to play.
I
I do
know.
think.
I was gonna
Oh,
say I
sorry,
know
you go
my
ahead.
locals were pretty big on it. My locals
Okay.
definitely took a look at the list and they saw it get played on my stream, I think, and they were like, "Wow, this deck does everything you want it to do. It draws as many cards as Rodan. It readies more cards than Rodan. It has almost as much speed hate as Rodan. It has almost as much speed pump, you know, and you get to play different tech pieces than the Void symbol, and you get to play in my opinion, a slightly better offense than Rodan. So maybe more than slightly, but either way, it's surprisingly easy to play an 8 difficulty attack as uh as Inasa and end up with a completely ready stage.
Yeah. I will say that I do think that's a big. So if we're going on like strategies that people aren't really thinking about that could show up big in Atlanta, uh, 4-check attacks I think are utterly. I know this is an unpopular opinion among most of the community. I think they're utterly broken. I actually think they
Is it
favor high
unpopular?
hands. Yeah, because I said it in the main court, and everybody's like piling on me, like, no, no, no. It's just smiling that's the problem. The 4-checks are fine, and I'm like, guys, the 4-checks allow super super wide build turns. They allow you to play low attack ratios. Like one character that George on our team, um, whose opinion I respect a lot, one character he's been having a lot of success with has just been Mothra, because Mothra's this
Oh,
8-hander. You can play 4-checks, and then you just you
that's
just
my other
build
dark
7,
horse.
and then you have built-in smiling insurance too, because smiling plays their thing. You just say, yeah, -9 speed, -10 speed.
And and
So
and Mothra gets access to that card you were just talking about, where you get to discard the big 8 speed attack for -8 speed too.
yeah, yeah,
Mothra's also
and
got it.
Mothra can even just play like Colossus Titan, snap 2 momentum, and then re-ready Mothra
Yes, I
to get the 2 momentum to do it. So like that's a cool character. I don't want to give away too much of what George has been cooking up, but that's just an example, right? Like the one that comes to mind, because I watched him destroy my brother with it the other day.
that
Uh
was
and of like the 4-check tribal archetype is coming, and I think it's going to hit us in ways we're not expecting. And so like Inasa is an early one, like, so Smiling's the obvious one, Inasa's
yeah.
there too. And then it's like even these like kind of oddball characters like Mothra, and I'm not even sure what other ones could do it, but like I just think 4-check tribal is so powerful. You decrease your variance considerably by never having to check a 3 on defense. Um, or on passing your checks, and you get these super wide build turns. So it's like typically you think of big beefy attacks as like, oh, those should be played by 5-handers, because they're not going to draw many attacks. But now it's like, oh, maybe you should play them on 7-handers, because you can just build like crazy.
Build a million, yeah. I
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Mothra, because that was one of the first characters people speculated on, kind of like Shishi Wakamaru, and then just
Yeah.
fell to the wayside. Like no one I see is playing Mothra, and that's another one my locals brought up again recently. That was like, yeah, why don't, like, that's right up my alley personally. You know, of just being like, hey, I've got effectively a speed reset on my face for your big massive attack, right? So
Mhm.
very few attacks have a higher speed than their printed difficulty. So like if you think of it that way, commit to reset a speed to put it to 0 before buffs and things like that. Like that's pretty good. And yeah, Colossus Titan giving you the 2 snap momentum makes it a lot more forgivable, and having that extra card is tough because you do have to discard it, but when you're going first If you get the build 6, you get a build 7 somehow. Because Mothra has symbols that can do that. You know, Mothra
Yeah.
has good and earth, I think, both for new training methods. So I am absolutely on board with the Mothra plan. I can totally understand where the 7-hander health is a little iffy. But that's a deck that is very cool, and if you can solve the momentum issues, if you can have a plethora of momentum, Mothra can be maybe the best deck to fight Smiling, more so than Rodan. You know,
Yeah.
if you can get -8 speed twice, easier than Rodan can get -4 speed twice, you know, that gives you a huge leg up. So Mothra is another one that I think, just like Inasa, has all the potential to be format warping, but people just aren't on it yet. The forecheck, I mean, that's like the forecheck attacks is probably a good discussion for the next orange card, blue card, because I could talk for hours
Yeah.
on what that does to the game. My sphere, I guess I don't hang out in the main court very often. Um, but everywhere I go, people seem to hate them. I do see a lot of people saying leave them alone and hit Smiling Titan because their other character likes the forecheck attacks, and it might have made like Inasa more relevant. I know Dan is huge on like let me have the forechecks so I can play all these 3 divs and my character where it matters. But I think the whole point is Inasa was designed in a world where you can't play 2 3 divs every single game going first unabashedly without failure every time. And that whole metric of the game is just, it just doesn't, I don't want to say you can't print forecheck attacks, but what I want to say is that they don't play well with others. You know, they don't play well with recheck attacks. They don't have enough of a cost to really like. There's just something wrong about it. Checks a 4 to play your foundation. If they were all 3 check attacks, and they just say if you check this to play a Titan or shift attack or a attack with a difficulty higher than 6 or whatever it needs to say, then it gets +1. That might be a completely different world, and I don't think you would see people obsess over exclusively playing those attacks, but it would still solve the quote unquote issue of how do I make an 8 difficulty attack not feel so bad when I check an attack? And that is, you know, make it so that it's explicitly a 4 when you play the attack. That's a little like, I don't know, like a forced design to make it work that way, but I would rather
Yeah.
see something like that, because when I go into a turn and the Smiling Titan has 11 foundations and 3 of them are struggling with study and they have 1 card in hand and they have an invincible body, I'm just looking at like I can't deal damage to them. I can't touch them, you know, like unless the 1 card in their hand is like the wrong zone. Spoiler, it's gonna be not a block. It's gonna be a Genkai's guidance or something, right? It's gonna be like it's like some defensive answer. And so like it's so frustrating when other decks with better speed hate I can hit because they're gonna check a 3 or they're gonna check a 2 maybe, you know, and I at least like have a chance. And you don't think that that one number makes a difference, but that one number is the difference between that Smiling Tiny having 11 foundations and having 8 foundations, because they didn't get to build 2 extra on turn 1, they didn't
Yep.
get to build an extra 1 on turn 2, and it's exponential. The game gets out of hand way sooner than you think. And yeah, I don't know. That's I went too deep on the forecheck stuff, but that is format warping for sure.
But you watch like so often, it's just kind of instinctually in me right now. When you watch your opponent build on turn 1, you know, I can't help it. In my head, I'm just like rooting for them to check bad, you know, because a bad turn 1 build
Makes the game easy.
is a huge predictor to who's going to win the game.
Yeah.
Who had the better turn 1 build, I would say, is probably the biggest predictor at who's going to win the game, even more so than who went first. And so I'm always like hoping that they check poorly, and then at some point with smiling, it's like, oh wait, it's like they literally cannot check poorly. This like they will just build every foundation they draw. Like it's just gonna happen. And so you just have to like take that hope out of you. It's kind of like soul sucking to me to not have the hope that like, well, maybe they can have a bad turn one build.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they're just never gonna have it.
and it's funny because this is a character that people thought was going to be format warping, and I think it's not working out. She's kind of having the Jiro 1 issue of, I thought I could hand this to a newer player and they could steamroll people, and it's not really working out. The deck isn't quite as explosive or quite as offensively capable as it should be, and I think that's Ryukyu. Definitely not a dark horse character, and potentially format warping, because I do think Ryukyu will be pretty represented in Atlanta, but I think people are kind of off the pedestal that she was on. I think people were ready for this to be like, oh my god, this character is a nuisance, something needs to happen, it needs to change. But then when you actually play the deck, it has a lot of similarities in that it's ramping this resource, it's building a lot, it's drawing a lot. I think that now that they're not playing the 2-check main board as often, which I waffle on, I actually don't know how much I would or would not play the 2-check right now. Because having played some all-symbol Ryukyu, it is fairly tough to break down walls. It's tough without any foundation readying, without any card pool clearing, without any check bonuses. It's actually pretty difficult to string into decks right now. There's a lot of ways to reduce a check. There's fighting for control, which is a favorite of Smiling Titans. It's what I like to call like passive defense, where it's not really like something you're doing in the enhanced step. It's not something that like your opponent's really gonna fight back and forth with you on. You're just flipping a foundation to figure out what they want to pay for. So you can passively low cost hack checks right now. Lots of breakers flying around, and so Ryukyu kind of struggles to play like 4 or 5 attacks the way the old combo oriented ones used to try and do. And I think that you do need like certain things, like we've talked about asset hate. Like you want to bring hate for everything, right? You gotta flip foundations, you gotta answer the foundation, you gotta answer actions, you gotta answer assets, you gotta blank attacks, you gotta flash it. Like all that stuff is easy to say and harder to find the right mixture of cards for. It's obvious if you have an answer for everything and you just draw them all, playing the game is simple, right? I think the Ryukyu decks got so far out of the gate and like are so explosive, and they're hard to hit. Vertical maneuvering makes it so it's like functionally impossible to hit them, but you have to make them spend that momentum so they don't do it on offense, right? And it creates this really disgusting loop of Ryukyu poking you, getting a bunch of momentum, and then you forcing her to use it all defensively because the deck is half blank cards. They're not playing other speed hate. They're not playing other defense. And once those decks evolve to have like defense that doesn't rely on vertical maneuvering equipment every single attack, is what it feels like at least. I think that they'll be in a much better spot. That's definitely a character I expect to see like on the representation chart, but I don't know if I expect to see it in Top Cut.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I did play against a Ryukyu the other night. I mean, it's obviously a vertical maneuvering equipment character. I think it's not going to be the only one. It's just the most obvious one.
Right.
You have to be packing asset hate, not only for Cape of No Return, because everybody's going to be on Cape of No Return, but for vertical maneuvering equipment. And so asset hate, like pass through walls, is great against like Cape of No Return, but like you really need like a hacker extraordinaire type thing for vertical maneuvering equipment. Yeah, but my problem that I realized, so I thought like hacker was like, okay, if I find my hacker, I'll just win this Ryukyu matchup. And then it turns out that Ryukyus play Dragon Strike, and that just takes down your hacker.
Yep.
And what I found out.
Also,
So then it was like, okay, I got to have some anti flip cards in here, like saving Bakugo or something.
Also, to get momentum, you probably have to hit them, which means they have to not be using vertical maneuvering device to completely block all your attacks. Ryuku can stay ahead
Right.
of you in momentum to prevent that hacker, and it's an interesting game at first, but it gets a little repetitive when you're like, okay, you played 2 blank foundations and didn't attack me, so now you have 2 momentum, which means you're holding like 2 or 3 cards still, and I cannot hit you with 2 or 3 attacks. I have to play a 4th attack
Yeah.
to even have an opportunity, you know?
Yeah. This Ryukyu was playing like Spirit Gun Mega, the 2 check with powerful 4. I thought that was interesting, a way to go big,
And a way to
to
go
dump
pick
them.
up vertical maneuvering equipment.
Yeah, exactly. And they could just dump their momentum into it and make it like 20 something damage. But again, the problem with going big right now is that everybody is teching for it because that's Smiling Titan. And
Yep.
so you are playing the strategy that everybody's teching for, which is a big question mark for me on Amajiki right now. I don't see people talking about him that much. I think like high velocity slice might be really good in Amajiki,
Okay.
um, to snap an extra momentum.
You know, I'm a goober. I like weird stuff. I think the correct call is Amajiki with Rando Spirit Gun. People,
Just to get your damage twice.
well, people, yeah, so people don't expect it, and they'll see you put everything into the first attack, and they'll go, "Oh, well, that's the one," you know, or they'll think like,
Yeah,
"Oh, well, he has to play." It replaces Armor of the Wolf, and that's the hard part. Is it has a smaller EX and a bigger powerful, which is generally worse, but because you get the once per turn damage, you get to play around resets better. And that's the difference is Armor of the Wolf is really weak to one reset because you generally have to do the once per turn and then get the speed
yeah.
up with momentum, and then they reset one of the 2 values, and then you don't have, like, if you EX and they reset speed, you can't do it again, you know, stuff like that. Rando's Spirit Gun gets naturally faster as long as you can give it speed, you know, one time, which you have momentum, so you definitely can. Um, and so it just, I don't know, it plays around resets a little bit better. Giving you your once per turn can bamboozle people. It does come at the cost of a 2 check in a deck that really wants to play Vast Hybrid, so, you know, your mileage may vary. But I will tell you this, I played Bertolt with Rando's Spirit Gun, never once used my once per turn ability twice. Every game I was just destroying people with powerful 4 and an 8 or 9 speed move, you know, with powerful 4.
Yeah.
So it never, the
Oh,
the use my once per turn never came up a single time. I don't even think, like, Bertolt's flip side, the once per turn is dependent on the opponent and shit. So like that was not relevant, but what was relevant was if I use basic training deadlock to give it a speed, or easily excited to give it a speed, it's now an 8 speed move. And that, you know, baseline with no
yeah.
investment is really powerful when you can just stack damage and more speed on it after a reset.
Yeah, to me, like that's why Black Abyss Black Abyss and Chimera Kraken become important, is to get that extra speed beyond the EX. Because
Yeah.
you're right, you do have to like get your Armor of the Wolf. Like that was how George's Void Rodan was my win-in match in St. Louis, and I always knew he was gonna have a barrier shield in hand, and so it was like, okay, I need to get this. I need to get this Armor of the Wolf to unblockable speed twice over. Um,
Yeah.
and then just hope he doesn't have the second barrier shield. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Bert though, because if you think that Rodan is going to be maybe a top 3 played character, I think he's might be the most played character. Bertolt gets access to the best Rodan killer, and that's Determined Advance. Can't take the speed below 6. You
Okay.
have to block it. You have to block it at 6 speed, and you're having to commit a lot of your resources. A lot of times, if someone plays Determined Advance against you as Rodan, you just have to eat it. You're
Yeah.
just eating that damage. Super free damage. I think that's an incredible attack against Rodan, and probably Bert uses it the best
And it gives
to
you a
snap
momentum,
momentum.
right? For Bertolt.
Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah.
snaps you momentum. So that's also a 7-hander killer. Is just
And it's got EX.
the
So you can
burn.
like,
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. So if they do fight you on it and put it back to 6 at some point, you just EX it. I could see it.
Yeah, that is such a Rodan killer. Like when I'm playing Okay, so my Rodan list is a little weird. I'm looking to remove attacks, and so typically, like when I'm playing against the bird, I'm removing the determined advances in the discard pile
Right.
as fast as I possibly can because I just know that's the like Rodan killer in there. For me, like so Ryukyu is like your character that you're thinking is like going to be pretty represented but not top. I'm going to go kind of similar on a similar symbol. I'm going to say Ymir.
Yeah.
Um, because I just don't think you're allowed to play the life symbol. I think the
Nope.
life symbol is off limits. You don't get nearly enough resets. Evade and copy does nothing against 10 speed moves. Um, I don't think we'll see a life symbol deck in top cuts.
It's so tough because Life Symbol has all these things from Attack on Titan that in any traditional set would be game breaking. You know, they've got a
Mm,
card, it's like a 4 diff, draw 2, 8 damage move or whatever. It's entering the Titan Forest, but it only does anything in a late game sense. And, you know, it like a 4 diff where it does nothing unless both players have 9 foundations would only matter if you're playing the life symbol in a previous format, you know? And in this
yeah.
format, it's just not that impressive, even if you get both abilities, which is so wild. Life characters don't pump speed very much, and so Ymir having 2 speed on everything seemed really good at first. But I can agree after playing it some more, um, you're basically forced to play Ymir on the life symbol. I cannot imagine trying to life gain with fire as my primary symbol and only using life
Yeah.
attuned cards. The life attuned cards that gain health do a good job at gaining a lot of health, but they don't do a good job at repeatedly gaining health the way Immortal Shapeshifter does. Um, and so they also don't pay life very often. So like you would be stuck there. Like the life symbol cards that pay life are pretty much all non-attuned cards and all very good. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was pretty big on Ymir and playing like traditional games, playing like older strategies, I guess you could say. I got smoked by Ymir a lot in the beginning, but as things have come around, I'm with you. The life symbol just it doesn't have that nuclear option that is kind of required right now. Resets like Idun box are unique instead of like encouraging training partner was in the past,
Hmm.
and I would love for there to be a way to object to that because I do think the life symbol has again crazy cards like meeting Hanji and stuff like that. But because those are attuned symbol cards, you don't have to play them in life decks. You can play them in a character that has access to resets, that has access to attack wipes, and until life gets that, you know, or we change the format somehow, I don't know how you would get rid of all the 4 check attacks, but you know, until Life Symbol gets to catch up to having a defense against them, I just yeah, I I don't see how you succeed in this form with the Life Symbol.
Yeah,
Life
it just
gain,
doesn't like Ymir should just be like better Endeavor 3 to some extent. Like Endeavor 3 is giving
right?
+2/+3 and Ymir is giving like +2/+20 and
And
or +2/+8. It should just be better seven-hander Endeavor 3, but
and the life gain should
yeah.
matter more because you'll watch Ymir go like take a hit for like 11 damage, go down to 10 or 11 health, and then gain it all back. But by the time you gain it all back, if you don't defeat the rival, they can now play 2 11 damage moves. And you can't block either of them because to gain life, you have to sacrifice foundations. There's only like 3 or 4 foundations total that gain you life without sacrificing a foundation. So you don't ever, even with the Ymir's like incredible build, um, you don't really like overcome that when you're trying to keep up with 12 damage moves, when you're trying to heal back that health. I think Ymir was a lot better when Reiner was the boogeyman and
Mhm.
you could like overcome that build, right? Like Ymir was a lot better when playing a 4 diff tasty riff and building a 0 and then forming to build another foundation took you from like 2 foundations back to 4 against Reiner, and none of them are face down, so he can't ruin you on your own turn. Now that Reiner's not keeping other decks away, keeping those high difficulty decks down, they're free to build out and afford those attacks. I think Ymir is just in a really, really bad spot. I think Ymir had a really good Reiner matchup and a pretty good Bertolt matchup. And those decks that played those high difficulty attacks but didn't add damage to them, or not a lot, 2 and 3 at most.
Yeah.
Rather than like the 5 and 6 that Smiling gives. I think you were in a much better spot. But yeah, Ymir can't block Inasa attacks. Ymir can't block Mothra attacks. Ymir can't block Ryukyu strings. He can't stop you from playing the strings. That's another big thing is, where's the breaker on the life symbol? Where is anything that the life symbol does to like stop you from playing more cards, right? Everything about the life symbol is increasing your own advantage, and it does nothing to stop the rival.
Yeah, you don't get access to those disruption pieces. And Ymir's 2-speed is not going to get over the top of Rodan.
No,
so Rodan can
Inasa.
just block the string. Yeah, it's just not enough speed pump. Like it would be back in the day. The symbol that I think does have a really good chance, and I think is going to be underplayed, is Order. I really like Ice Sword Execution right now.
Order has
Smilings
some
and
fucked up
King Ghidorahs.
cards.
Yeah, it gets a lot of. I really like stage. I like stage control pieces right now, like hitting your rival stage. And Order just gets a ton of that. Order gets the maybe one of the best attack lineups in my opinion, with Walk the Dog and the stun pieces.
I like
Order is. There's a card I'm forgetting about. I am forgetting a card on Order that was a big deal. It wasn't just
Is it a
Ice
foundation?
Sword. I think so, but I can't remember it.
Is it the one that freezes 2 foundations?
No. Do you like that one?
That's my favorite right now.
Freeze 2?
I forget what it's called. I think it's not Trying to Reach Aaron. Maybe it's a 2/5. I thought it was a 2/4. But there's a card with Armin's face on it. Crisis of Confidence. You spend a momentum, you freeze 1 rival foundations, and if they have 8 or more, you get to freeze 2 of them. That card, if you can keep paying for it, can lock the rival out of a specific foundation over and over and over again. And it's a pretty fairly costed card overall. One of the more powerful forms. It's not like broken because it's pretty fair, but if you are combining it with, a character that gets free momentum every turn, the form speed on it is pretty insane. So I'm a big fan of the freeze mechanic right now. I've been playing I think it's a rare attack that's just a 4 mid for it. Says freeze a rival foundation. If they have 2 frozen cards, draw a card. And that has been one way to stop the high difficulty decks if you go first, if you get in there early. Chaos Order, massively good combination right now because you can play Fast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, and you can play Ice Sword Execution, and you can play cards like Crisis of Confidence. And I've gotten to like freeze 4 foundations, and all of a sudden that Smiling Titan went from I built 6, I have access to 2 cards, and it's not League Invitation. So that's been a massive game changer for me. And the Order symbol being able to like borrow, the attuned symbol cards, being able to be slotted into decks that can kind of fuel them better, I think is a big deal. Because the one thing I notice is every Order card is like, that's really good, is like solid, but if you spend 1 momentum, it's insanely good. If you spend 1 momentum on Ice Sword, it's a 10 damage move and freezes something. If you spend 1 momentum on Walk the Dog, it's 9 damage, which is, a pretty big deal. If you spend 1 momentum on Pressing the Advantage, it's now a 5-speed move instead of a 3-speed move. So if they're committed out, it's now a much bigger deal. So I think Order is there, but I think you might see a Chaos deck playing Order cards more than you'd see an Order deck right now. But Krista is pretty good. Krista is very good at doing a snack time impression.
Yeah, and the Order, I Hacker Extraordinaire is just very good right now, and if you need the
Another
momentum,
momentum
then
cost.
I'll take some, but you can also like get the momentum from Hacker, which I
True.
like to, if I can get those on defense, it makes my backswing so much better. And then Order got access to okay, Waylay might be just a sideboard card, but it actually just dunks on Ryukyu. Like when their only defense is their VMEs, and you just take away their momentum, or it dunks on Amajiki. So a very good piece there, and it got access to two very unique two checks: the pressing the advantage to bring back indiscriminate shock, and the
Farewell. Farewell
farewell
between
between
friends.
friends. Yeah, I love farewell between friends. You can't use that until my next turn. Um, so I think that's like a dark horse symbol for me. I have tried making order decks, and I can't. I don't know who the best is. I think it's maybe Bionic,
Order decks suffer
but I haven't
because
decided.
I think order decks suffer because the new hotness is 4 check attacks, right? And they're in the
Mhm.
opposite lane. They got 2 really good 2 check attacks. And I don't think
Yeah,
that there's enough good ones and zeros anymore, really, to help them out. Um and that's just why I don't think an order deck like as the primary symbol is gonna work out, because I'm in the same boat. I've looked at a lot of order characters and I go, wow, this is so sick, look at all this cool stuff I can do. But man, it'd be a lot better if I had struggling with studies and chivalrous competitor to protect it. It'd be a
yeah,
lot better if I had, barrier shield in this deck and I can play all these new order cards. Like the old order cards are just not that appealing, or there's like a new attuned version. Like even Order gets a speed reset to printed on a playable while committed card, Citywide Crisis. There's a 2/4 that admittedly is not playable while committed, but it's an order attuned, same cost, 2/4 E remove, same block
Mhm.
zone, and it just resets the speed to printed. So, there's a lot of stuff you can do outside the order symbol using those cards. And I just don't think cards like Award the Victor and Final Test and uh Botan's coaching, they all either end up on a symbol that's better right now. Like Botan's, you can play Void and still include it. You can play Death and
Yeah.
still include it, right? Those are just, I think, better symbols right now. So I don't know if a Void deck will make it, but I would believe that a Farewell Between Friends deck, or a deck that's leaning heavily on the freeze mechanic, could get there. Um, I just, yeah, no, I've been a huge fan of having Piercing Ice Wall, which is freeze 2 foundations that have been committed during this attack. I'm a huge
That's
fan of
Paul
Vast
Phoenix.
Hybrid.
That's going to be Paul Phoenix's card.
Yeah, no, dead ass. Like 1,000,000%. He's going to stun 3, freeze 2 of them, and ready the third one to draw a card so he can keep stunning you. That's the most Paul Phoenix card there might be, dude. Yeah, no, it's tough because I also really like the strategic maneuver combo. You can play air and order attuned, and you can build psychic spirit glass with strategic maneuver. And that has been like a win condition
Oh,
in a can
interesting.
for me, where I just build. I think I did that. That's one of the reasons I played all Rodan, was it still got access to, because I would have played Void if it didn't have access to psychic spirit glass. Because you just, if you can play 2 of those in a turn and Farewell Between Friends, like there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get damage in and also like ruin your opponent's next turn. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of power there, but I think the order characters are just better on their other symbols right now. Um, but I want to talk about, give me a list. Give me your top 3 represented characters.
Uh, I think we already talked about. I think it's Rodan King Ghidorah Smiling. I think Pony could make it. Pony's a character we haven't really talked about that much so far. But it's because like I just have very low belief in Pony. Um,
Pony does struggle defensively into the big attack deck.
yeah. There's struggling defensively. Again, it's like getting over the top on your ultra defensive decks. I Pony to me is like, yeah, you're gonna destroy most decks with it, but I'm not sure that when it comes to the regional, the
Yeah,
Rodans and the Smilings and the King. Like, I'm not sure that deck's going to put up results. So,
I think
but my top three would be King Ghidorah, Rodan, and Smiling.
I
And
think Pony is like the perfect candidate of a bubble character.
yeah,
I think
yeah, I would not be surprised if yeah, there's like 3 or 4 ponies on the bubble.
yeah, I expect to hear a lot of, oh man, I was 1 5 check away from topping as Pony. Because Pony has that uninteractable high roll. It's you just doing what the Mikasa decks were doing with a slightly higher cost, but I think overall more consistency because you draw naturally from the character. So like you do lose a card, but you go through your deck faster. Um, and you have 2 opportunities to discard a card that draws a card, right? So sometimes you discard 2 and
Yeah.
draw 3, and that's absolutely insane. But yeah, I think my top 3 is probably King Ghidorah, Smiling, and I'm gonna say Godzilla. I think Godzilla is still a fan favorite. I think after the nerfs to Bertolt and Reiner, I think you can do a lot of what you wanted to do with those characters both in Godzilla. A fantastic determined advance character. An absolutely
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic character for that. Adding just adding an attack that Godzilla gets a free momentum from is a big deal. Now it's and it qualifies for his damage bonus, which is a big deal, and it's EX, which is a big deal for that deck because the vast majority of the time Godzilla closes out games against Rodans. It's where they get that lucky 1 hit or 2 hits turn 2 because the Rodan just doesn't have the right zone. They don't have the zone changer, whatever. They partial, and they get hit once or twice, and then it only takes 1 move from Godzilla to hit to kill them, and it's almost always smashing stomp with EX. Now they've got a different zone, a different EX3, and it fuels itself potentially. So that character also has the board reset that like Reiner trying to keep like high difficulty decks down. If you catch a Smiling Titan with like 3 attacks in their hand and you wipe their board and the best they can build next turn is 4 at most, you're in a pretty good position, especially if you have an asset like Battle Arena out, because Godzilla doesn't destroy assets. So Godzilla leaning heavily into assets like Twisting, was it Twisty Surroundings and Battle Arena? Although those are both terrains, I don't know if you play them both. My point being, if you get a couple of assets out and you blow up the board and you build 2 foundations and you've got momentum, you can be in a prime position to skip a turn on a deck that can't even attempt a 5 diff, right? They can't even go, oh,
Yeah.
you're at 1 health. If I just check a 5, I win. Like, they don't even have that option if they're playing that, 4-check tribal kind of archetypal thing. So I think Godzilla is actually going to be still in the top 3 most represented. If not Godzilla, I'm putting Toga 3 there. Toga 3 is probably the real answer because it's a waifu character. And once you spend all that money to build the Toga deck, you're gonna play
committed. Yeah.
You're not gonna play that deck once. I'll say that. You're not gonna get 4 Walk the Dogs and play that deck once. But Godzilla and Toga play very similar attack lineups, I feel like, or at least, they have very similar game plan of like I'm loading a zone and stunning you and generating momentum to dunk you like fairly quickly. So if I can have a flex spot.
I think Godzilla, not only does he get determined advance, but he also can play a pretty good Colossus Titan.
Yes.
Snap 2 momentum. Yeah, I get to build this down, and unless you attack this, I win my next turn.
I get to commit out, and also I get to commit out and have 2 momentum.
Yeah, because those 2 momentum, are going to be really like +4 to check. So it's okay to commit out for it, and you can play like League Invitations or something, and help your checks get better, or you can do something around it. I was seeing some decks that were there were some like put into my competition on 4-check tribal where they were like making sure to check an 8 on their Colossus Titan and then snap 2 momentum. So yeah, crazy. Godzilla, that's a good choice. I guess I just always disrespect Godzilla because anytime somebody plays Godzilla against me, I just find him way too easy to block.
Yep. They
Maybe
don't
Determined
play.
Advance changes that though with the 6 speed. And yeah, Toga 3 I think is going to be the most popular risky encounter character. Toga 1 is probably the better aggro version, but Toga 3 can actually put up a pretty good defense with chaos. And there's so much stun that you can get. My brother's been playing Toga 3. He's still going to be on Toga 3. Between the Draw Your Swords Levi Foundation and Def Maneuvers, and there's a really funny card in Attack on Titan, Lumbering Monstrosity. It is only a Deadlock enhance. It says Deadlock, your attack gets stun 1.
Yeah.
If you want to play a defensive Toga, you can put in those Lumbering Monstrosities, and if they go to Deadlock, you can just like stun 4 on every attack, and just wipe them off the earth, which keeps them at their 10 foundations, where you're very, very comfortable. Yeah, the risky, I think like risky encounter. I hate risky encounter as a card. I wish
It's
it
the
never
only.
existed,
It's
but
the,
I think it's needed in the format right now to stop the wall decks, because he has so many decks that can just wall up and go to 20 foundations, and I love risky encounter just punishing them. So I almost think it's needed.
well, yeah, I that's definitely the design element of it. Was they're like, okay, how do we make an attack that's really good for string decks, that is a payoff if your opponent blocks your first 5 attacks, you know? And the answer
Right.
is a 3 difficulty move that swings for 1,000,000, and it's the end of the game either way, right? Because if your opponent blocks your risky, and even if you didn't have to destroy 3 foundations, you were just committed out at the end of a string, um you know, like the game would probably be over 90% of the time anyways. So having like that forced, like you have to eat your own stage to not only help you get a bigger damage bonus, but to try and reinforce like, okay, the game is ending. The game is ending because I'm either
Mhm.
winning or I'm losing, and it's heavily costed. I like that idea. The fact that it's a 3 difficulty move that routinely swings for 13 damage, and I don't have to draw it, and I'm allowed to play more than 1 per turn. I mean, it's a little much.
Yeah, if it was a little less of a turn 2 card, um, because even if you play it on like turn 2, it destroy 3, now you're at like 4 less than your rival, and now it's an 8 damage move.
And then my
Like,
character gives
if
it 3 damage.
yeah, if it was more of just like a purely a late game finisher, like okay, it's turn 9, I need to just one hit 15 health.
And it has
Uh, n-
stun.
yeah, it's just doing too much. Yeah, the idea of the design is good.
It
The application of the design was too heavy-handed.
yeah, the Risk Encounters wants to make punishments more consistent, and that's a big part of the King Ghidorah deck, right? We were talking about like this is a deck where if you leave the door open, it will kick it down. Risk
Mhm.
Encounter is a huge part of that. I wouldn't be surprised to see like Elder Taguros that have like a flexible game plan now, that if you waste resources fighting off the Twisting Azure Inferno, well, they could just play 2 risky encounters from their stage. And Elder Taguro is a character that on 1 or 2 foundations can maybe deal with 1 or 2 attacks, you know, swapping the speed and damage
Yeah.
by just destroying the last of their stage. Like, it's not as big of a deal, right? So I wouldn't be surprised to see a deck like Elder Taguro that's like, here, I'm going to play 3 attacks from my discard pile every turn, and I'm a 7-hander with stat adjustment, and I have 2 of the best defensive symbols right now, right, with Evil and Death. So, you
Yeah,
know,
risky encounter is people need to be playing confused. Confused
remove
is
it.
a nuts foundation at the moment. Take away the risky encounters, or just take away a keyword, take away throw, take away EX.
Take away
Like,
weapon.
it's yeah, um it's such a good foundation at the moment, but because it's been around since set 2 and it's never really seen play, nobody thinks about it. It's one of those like Passover cards when you're scrolling UVS Ultra.
It struggled because Chaos decks didn't need it at the time. They were a little
Mhm.
too aggro, and focusing on, so every time I've seen it played, it's almost never for the keyword hate. It's almost
Yeah.
exclusively for the discard pile removal element. And it's like been a part of like kooky mill strategies. It just like added to the few ways to like target remove attacks and stuff like that from before.
Yeah.
But there was definitely niche applications. Like I definitely have removed charge from a attack that would have given +1 to the powerful and a home run combo. You know, I've removed
Mhm.
punch from a card so it can't be added to momentum with full no punches. So I'm definitely a fan of the card, but I can understand why Void wasn't super good at the time. I think it has Air, which was never a long enough game strategy for it to matter. And Chaos
Yeah,
was
no, it's
just
just
doing,
like playing from the discard has become Ghidorah, Elder Toguro, Risky Encounter, Combined Firepower. It's just become such a heavy thing that like now discard pile hate. If you can run it, you should run it.
yeah. And you can play it with cards like Deception Dagger. Or you were talking about like you can
Mhm.
be like a more defensive Toga, like between Deception Dagger and uh what's the name of the card we were just talking about?
Confused,
Confused.
confused.
I'm confused on the name of the card. Uh yeah, between those two cards, like you can do a pretty good job of scrubbing out momentum or scrubbing out discard piles early. And it's like part of your normal game plan anyway. So I'm definitely on board with that. I don't know how many I could afford to main board, but I'm definitely citing that card because just hitting a risky or
Yeah.
two can be a big deal, and your opponent's like never doing it first. So you're pretty much always going to have one enhanced step to do it with. Um, I think the other thing that people are really kind of sleeping on, or I I see it, but I don't see it getting like any fanfare, I guess. And this goes back to like order just fitting better in other decks. The ambition of Irwin Smith is one of the greatest foundations in the set, and I thought it was going to be way more ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I thought characters with the order symbol were going to be everywhere, just on different symbols. And it turns out there's not that many evil order characters and like death order characters that can survive a smiling titan turn 2 without drawing like exactly barrier shield and stuff like that. But enhanced sacrifice commit one rival foundation, that used to be on one of the most powerful foundations in the game. That was shock treatment,
Hmm.
which was just enhanced destroy, same thing, commit one rival foundation, do it on their turn. And that card wasn't unique. It also had an offensive discard of momentum to do the same thing, which made it like insane. But on the other hand, the ambition of Irwin Smith, if you have the death symbol, after you sacrifice one or more foundations, draw a card on both turns. So Irwin Smith is like on the cusp of being like one of the realest characters of all time. I think his numbers are just a little bit wonky, and like there might not be a big enough payoff for having wall counters yet. There's some nice ones, but not like a full game plan. But that's a card that I thought was gonna be like a much bigger deal. And it's funny because it works against ruin, right? If the opponent
Yeah.
makes you sacrifice a card, if they ravage you, then you discard the card and you sacrifice a card, but then you get to draw one back. So I think you were talking about cards that touch the rival stage and like order cards in general. I think much in the same way that Confused is kind of like passed over. I think the ambition of Irwin Smith is passed over because it generates so much card advantage over the course of 2 turns in a world where you want to build as wide as possible, and your opponent is going to be making you destroy foundations in almost every deck. Almost every deck is playing
Yeah.
armored titan attacks, or the stupid one that flips a 2 diff after you ruin 2, or what's the other ruin card that's really popular? Colossus Titan makes you flip 2. Was it? Maybe it was just Reiner. Maybe there was just a time where Reiner was making me draw a card every turn.
Yeah, it's one of the best characters for this is Shigaraki 3 too. And
Yeah.
um Carson is going to be playing Shigaraki 3 in Atlanta, and just been having a lot of success with it because Evil Symbol gets a lot of answers to smiling, and now you get access to these order attuned cards like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um like ambition of Irwin Smith. So he's been having a lot of success on that deck. Although I'm not sure how often he's going to find a unique foundation in 130 cards, but
Well,
we'll have to see.
you can lead a horse to water, but you can't help him shuffle his deck. Uh, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is Shigaraki, it turns out, is one of the only characters. It's basically Irwin and Shigaraki. I think the only other characters that would even qualify for both effects are Sir Night Eye and Botan. So that's probably the reason why is there's no like solid defensive six-hander who can, because you're running a big risk playing a 19 health character with no speed hate. -1 to the check is something Smiling Titan and like 4 check attacks are already equipped to handle. So you are running a pretty big risk with that. But that's on my like, I can't believe this doesn't make Irwin Smith just like immediately playable,
Yeah.
And that's really got to be it. Is there's just not that many characters that get to run that foundation.
Yeah. That's well, I'm trying to think. I think that's pretty much everything I got for the Atlanta Regional. I very excited for this event. I'm a little bummed at okay, this is gonna be my last thing. This is gonna be a very controversial take. I'm a little bummed at Mikasa and Reiner getting hit.
Oh my god, dude! Don't.
Only because
I'm
only
muting you.
because
I'm muting you. You don't get to talk now. There's no shot, bro. No, you're actually muted. They can't hear you because there's no chance in this world that the amount of people posting, "Hey, I'm not going to Atlanta," and are now going to Atlanta is worth the trade-off of you getting to have some big brain. I can actually beat Mikasa and Reiner. Because I know you. You're still muted. I know you. You are like, I had a 9-1 matchup. I would have beat them all. Everyone would have been so impressed because I wouldn't lose to any of the boogeyman characters. And it's not worth it because we would have not hit 100 people if they didn't make those changes. I'm going to unmute you. But if you say anything about Mikasa being not that bad or Reiner destroying my foundations during my own attack being okay, I will mute you again.
Okay, hear me out. Hear me out. No, I'm just saying that like it was a different strategy. Okay, Mikasa I'm okay with, right? Because we have Pony. We have a close 1-to-1. But Reiner was a different strategy to go up against. And I'm a little bummed that like here we are after the biggest set in Universe's history, and the two best characters are still going to be like Rodan, Godzilla, and King Ghidorah. Like none of like Smiling is going to make it to be a format warping character, but like Reiner would have been a bigger warping character than Smiling.
Yeah, it's resource denial on both turns, bro. Like it's I don't know. I don't think Reiner was really a different strategy so much as he just broke a core tenet of the game. Because like if you're telling me his strategy is destroy all your foundations, the only reason why that strategy didn't exist before is because it's completely unfun, uninteractive, and generally doesn't matter what counterplay you have. You can't really adjust to play around not having foundations, right? Like you can't just say, well, I guess I'll review all the high difficulty cards and only play the low difficulty ones. Like especially when the low difficulty ones will require you to play more of them. So like
yeah, and he gets a 0 out.
Yeah, and he gets to continue to destroy your foundations. Like it was too snowball.
Okay, I guess my disappointment there is not necessarily Mikasa and Reiner getting hit. It's that I wish Attack on Titan gave us better designed strong characters.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Because the strong characters they gave us were just crazy. Like, it turns out, like looking back on it, it's kind of funny because this is the character that caused the biggest uproar. But Bert might have been the best, like, designed, strong, fair character.
I'm still not super sure if Berthold unerrated was really even that crazy, because the majority, see, that's where it's funny, because Bertolt's the one that I would stick up for if I had to pick one, because when I play Bertolt now, people don't block my attacks. They don't fucking ever let me do the once per turn, not once. So like, I don't know if it changes. Like, so for example, if Bertolt can respond to everything, do you just keep blocking everything because you know it's going to go to momentum eventually anyways? And like the mentality is different now because now you're waiting for like an acceptable one to block. I don't know. But whenever I play Bertolt, nobody ever fucking blocks my attacks until they're lethal anyways. So I have no idea how you were building that character to take advantage of the response more often unless you were just playing higher damage moves. But like, he's already kind of built to just play like one big high difficulty move. And then if you block it, you want to shift it, right? You don't really want to add it to momentum. Like if they block a Colossus Titan attacks, do you want a third momentum or do you want the shift side, right? So Bertolt's the one I would stick up for, but at the same time, I didn't get to watch those decks at full power, so they could have just been doing something like heinously different. Because I know in my heart of hearts that if you play a Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, and if I completely block it, it goes to your momentum right now, I would be very upset. And you can still do that, but it's only once per turn, and I just don't see people chain blocking that often. So if unerrated Bertolt was just like better into Rodan, and he's the same into everyone else, basically, then they might have gone a little too far with it. But at the same time, I am not upset at any of the bans or erratas that they made. I do wish that they had made better characters, because the characters are generally unimpressive except for that one obviously broken thing they did, and because it was so obviously broken we couldn't let them do it, so now they do nothing, right? They do nothing super unique. Reiner's ability to ruin your stage by him playing long strings should be impressive and worthwhile, but no one wants to do it anymore because it's not so total and complete. I haven't seen anyone really try to play Reiner and like focus on any aspect of him other than his symbol spread and the fact that he has 35 health. You know, like the fact that you can play like a chaos deck with risky and he has a high health, and the ruin part just never seems to come up. Like, but I haven't faced that many Reiners, and that's the biggest takeaway is once a character gets errated, once they get depowered, people just don't even want to try anymore. Even if the character is still good, even if the character is still like very playable, if they went from A tier to B tier, people don't even want to play it anymore. Whereas they would always play that character that arrived as a B tier and never got nerfed.
Yeah, there's just something about it where you just kind of get angry at what could have been.
Yeah.
When you're playing it, like I can't shake it. Like I just, I get it because I have that emotion of like I don't want to be playing this eroded character. After like this is a I don't know, it feels tainted in some way. But yeah, I guess that's my biggest gripe. That's why I'm so excited for Dark Deku coming out this next weekend. Is we're getting a very, very strong character. He's interesting. I don't think he's unfair by any stretch.
He fits into the format. He fits into the format of like, we're trying to kill string decks. He's very good at killing string decks and like preventing them from beating on him with his front side. And on his back side, he's really good at defeating the one big attack decks. So I think he fits into the format really well. But he's another character that's like, for example, gonna push life decks out. Life decks, the answer is so obvious. You just transform, turn your whole stage sideways, and play one big move. The Fajin knee move is definitely the one. I've already played against Justin Birch, flashing that attack against me, and because of the way the rules are very weird with how you get bonuses and how responses on attacks work, it's very uninteractable. And that's my only real issue is the level of interaction with it is pretty tough for like the combo version. But I'm not inherently against having decks that are like that, because they should be weak to things like Genkai's Guidance, for example, right? They should be weak
Yeah, there
to
should be answers.
Confuse. Like if you want to play a
Yeah.
4 attack deck, the answer should be that you're weak to, very specific interactions. And because of the symbol spread he gets, and because of the way the combo works, he gets to negate a lot of your interactions. So I'm excited to see what people do, because there's a lot of different ways to play him on like 5 symbols. But I'm a little afraid that he reduces the game to this arms race that we're already in, where I already feel like it doesn't matter if I don't draw a cape or barrier shield. Like that's the whole game. Is on your turn, I have to have cape, I have to have barrier shield, I have to have Genkai's, or else we're not really playing a game together. We're playing it like 2 solitaire games. And
Yeah, it feels.
he creates that
It
scenario.
does. Yeah, it does feel like we're becoming more and more of a game of hand traps and things like that, and that's not as fun as breaking through as a stage, and both players are seeing what's on the field and and how they have to order things. It's not very fun just to say, "Oh, did you draw it?"
Yeah.
Or do you have like the one thing that just silver bullets me? But he might delete the life symbol decks, but he's also might be the best life symbol character, because he naturally gets that defense on face of
Right.
take the speed to 0, yeah, and flash it.
Oh, that's true. He does have life.
Yeah, so he could be like the best defensive life character in that sense. Paul Phoenix, I'm a little worried about, because I feel like he's kind of in the sense of the Attack on Titan characters. I just think he does his one thing and he does it way too well, and he's way too easy for beginners to pick up, and
And
it's going
he
to be
also
toxic when he's.
encourages you to be playing hand traps because your board gets stuck.
Yeah, you have no more board. It's like Toga 3 on steroids. More damage than Toga 3 from the output though,
They
and
put
the Heaven
indiscriminate
Piercing
shock on
Ice
a
Wall.
character.
Yeah, I think Paul Phoenix is probably going to be a mistake. Similar design to the Attack on Titan characters, of just like, but Deku. Yeah, I guess he does become that kind of one punch deck. We'll have to see how common that is, or but if he's playing on his front side most of the time, then he's a uh pretty fair, fun character.
Yeah, my beef with his front side is he has so many refunds for his cost that it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like super fair. It feels very much like just like a synergy driven pile, right? Where if he opens like double Defiant Stance, you're like, oh, that's -3 speed for free, and it gets pretty
Yeah.
cumbersome. But we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Paul should be good into Midoriya, right? Like you stun him out so he can't pay the cost, and it doesn't matter. I do think Paul is like really scary on face, but having played like Farewell Between Friends and pressing the advantage quite a lot, um, it's pretty weak into a lot of the disruption. If you try to play the setup attacks to stun them out, you get pretty weak to Breaker because you're discarding cards. So if you're drawing cards, you're probably using those resources. And as a 6-hander, if you're not playing, you probably don't want to play the high difficulty attacks. Just putting stun 2 on a really big move already is not as impressive as putting 2 speed and damage on it. And none of them like really commit the rival out. I don't think any of the there's a 7-diff 3-check that does it, but we're talking like 4-check archetype. So I think he's going to fall a little flat. I think he's going to be one of those guys that dumpsters a locals, and your locals is going to go, what the fuck was I supposed to do? And then if you just start building your deck to be like, okay, well, if I just wait for him to do the once per turn, and then I barrier shield the once per turn attack, or he he checks poorly, and the next attack is going to be the one that he does the once per turn on, and I just breaker 2 here, I think he'll fall a little flat. He has no defense. His symbols are not the best, but it's true that he can just look at your turn 2 board and go, you have 1 card in hand, you're dead. You're just dead. You
Yeah.
know, no, whichever attacks of these you block, it's not going to be the last one, and it's not going to be the big one. So it doesn't matter. You just die.
Yeah, I just think he's a little too a little too simplistic.
Yeah,
For
I am jealous that the other regionals are going to get these cards, and they'll be legal, right? Because you talked about how this Atlanta format is going to be kind of the only event of this format, and it's a very weird world to live in. And I am so excited for Tekken cards and Tekken characters that I am really sad that we're not going to get to see them at this Atlanta regional, because I am so down for all these characters. Devil Jin looks sick. Martial Law is like kind of boring on his face, but I bet he's pretty interesting to play. And I'd like to see a couple more cards for his support, right? But Zhao Yu has like a little bit of uniqueness, not like super breaking the mold, but has potential to have like some strategies we haven't seen before. So they're all very cool. I do think the best one's just going to be Devil Jin saying everything is for 1,000,000 and I never check bad, but we'll see how it goes.
Interesting. When I first read that, I thought this guy's terrible. This
Yeah,
guy,
5-hander with no card advantage? Fuck that.
yeah, it's like this guy's gonna suck.
Yeah. And then you
Yeah,
found out you
but
can play repeated 100% Smash for free.
yep. And the Hawks, I saw the Hawks feather deck that Justin was playing.
Oh yeah,
You
the
lead with your
18
feather
cards
score,
in my
make them
card
all.
pool.
Yeah,
5-hander with
make them all.
18 cards. I like the Hawks Feather version just because I'm a synergy fiend. I don't care how big the number gets. I care like how many cards you can get to work together. And when you say feathers don't count, and then you just start adding feathers to your card pool to pump up your damage and pump up your check, and they don't count, like, and also the card you add, by the way, for that response doesn't count towards the difficulty because you've already determined
Yeah.
the difficulty before you make the check. So the card enters before the card you're playing in the card pool, which also makes it easy to do certain combos like Rando Spirit Gun. You can play Rando Spirit Gun as your first card, add an attack to the card pool, do your once per turn if you check bad, and then, just get like +1 to the check, and then do it a second time. So that's like kind of a cool thing, is you can like force bad combo attacks to work for you, which is very thematic for Devil Jin, but that's a video for a different time. So I'm super excited for Tekken. I wish we got to play with the Tekken cards in it. Maybe we'll get like some previews or something that maybe we'll get like some early access decks or something. I don't know.
Would be awesome if they brought some product.
If you
But
could
speaking of
buy,
Atlanta,
oh dude, if the
I
vendors
probably
could,
gotta take.
sorry, if the vendors could sell like the new challenger decks, the new starter decks and stuff coming out, like that'd be huge for them, wouldn't it? They get like
Yeah, they would make so much money.
a pre-release. That would be something, we're talking like how to make like events special for people who scrub out. What if every regional had like a preview item, had like a pre-release as a side event? I think people would dig that.
Yeah, new players would definitely come to get their cards and then bring them back to their locals and say, "I got the cards first."
Yeah, yeah.
And it encourages
Oh,
vendors to go and support the players because now they're going to make money selling the new stuff.
yep. You could do like a starter deck side event where it's like it's your first chance to buy Tekken Clash decks. People would eat that shit up just to get the cards. They'd like enter the side event and be like, "Nah, bro, you get the win. I just wanted to buy the deck, and the only way you can buy the deck is doing the side event or something." I don't know. We're getting off topic for the Atlanta Regional, but that would be a very cool thing, I think, for regionals, is if they just had like pre-release products. And I think you're right. I think it would help the vendors a lot, because when you travel with all that product, you have to transport that product. So you got to buy a trailer. That's extra gas. You probably got to drive yourself all the way there. You don't get to fly there. Or if you do, you got to pay for the shipping of all your material. And like, so if it was like a guaranteed gangbuster product that they could sell at those events, not only would people be more interested in going, but I think it'd be better for the vendors. So that might be an idea to toss around in the future, because if you remember at the first HLC, they had a side event for a League of Villains pre-release, a preview pre-release at the first ever World Championship for the reboot era. and people traveled to Las Vegas just for that. Just to
Yeah,
be
I
at
was
the
one of those.
HLC.
I was one of those. I traveled just for that. Not just for that, but just because I was like, I want to be where the action is.
Right.
Um, and so now you're giving me a reason to go. Like, I didn't
Absolutely.
need much of a reason, but just something beyond watching the other people and being jealous all day. Like, give
Right.
me
Hey, I think I
give me
feel
a
if
reason to go.
doing commentary while you're jealous of people is very difficult, by the way. You're just watching people like, man, I couldn't be me in top 4 ever. All right, man. That being said, do
True.
you have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up? We've been here over 2 hours now talking about the upcoming Atlanta Regional, which is going to be within 24 hours of the time of this gets posted. It'll probably be posted like noon tomorrow, right before I head to the airport. So, any closing thoughts?
No, if you're playing a deck underneath 85 cards, I'm gonna mill you out.
The declaration
That
has
is
been
what
made.
that is what I'm gonna do. But yeah, I'm gonna be staying up all night tonight, sleeving up my retro deck here. So
Ooh.
and my MHA Spotlight deck. So we'll see how this goes. I'm still thinking through. I'm still thinking through retro drill. Okay, I opened them last night. Drill Man.
Drill Man's pretty popular.
I'm gonna I'm
I've seen
gonna
more than
play
one
the
person.
yeah, play the 13 diff that makes them flip everything, and they never get foundations because I'm constantly making them flip 5 every turn for free.
Yeah.
Um, and then if they always have to block it or they ruin their whole stage, could even play like Decay. Kyle showed me like I could play like Decay Awakened and then keep playing like the Colossus Titan stuff. So
Yep.
it's an idea. It's an idea, but yeah, that's what I'll be doing. And I guess I'll see you in like 36 hours.
Yeah, something like that. 36:24. I'll be there midnight, so I'm gonna be heading straight to the hotel room, showering, and then probably staying up. I don't know. I do pretty bad like performing in events. So the last webcam event, I slept for 4.5 hours before the event. Did absolutely terrible. When I stay up all night, I do absolutely fine. So I find that the same thing happens with commentary, where if I wake up, like if I go to sleep and I wake up, I'm just groggy and it never goes away. But if I stay awake and I start to do something, I can stay awake all day and it's fine until like round 6 or 7 when someone puts like a Rodan on screen and they realize that they can't kill their opponent because their offense is fraudulent. So they just resort to milling their opponent out. And then I'm like, all right, well, we're going to be here for a minute. And then all the energy drains from my body.
I need you to put me on stream. I need.
Round 1, we're getting it out of the way early then.
All right,
We're
all
getting it
right.
out of the
Sign me
way
up.
ASAP. No, I gotta. We'll take a look at what decks are there. So I think I said for my most represented, it was like Godzilla, Ghidorah, Smiling. You had Smiling, Ghidorah, and who was the third?
Rodan, just
Rodan.
Rodan instead
Okay,
of Godzilla.
Rodan's probably up there. Yeah, I'm very excited to see how that pans out. And then Toga, I think, was basically both of our fourth choice. If we had to swap one out. So those are the decks we expect to see. I'm very, very excited. If you are playing in Atlanta, good luck to you. I hope to see you in Atlanta. Always feel free to come up and say hi, wave, whatever. Just don't do it while we're doing commentary. People like to make funny faces, and we're going to miss something crucial. And then everyone at home is going to be like, wow, these commentators don't know anything. But they don't know that I've got Tamron Cardwell like making like goofy faces at me behind the camera. So, but that's going to do it for this episode. I had an absolute blast. I hope you did too, David. I hope you guys listening at home did. And I hope that you've done all your preparation for Atlanta because it's too late now. The time has come. We're going to find out who our last qualifiers for Nationals and Worlds are and who's going to get those all-important championship points because, like you said, this is basically it. This is our last regional. So it's your last chance to get those points.
This is what we play for.
All right. We'll see you guys in Atlanta. Peace out.
All right. See ya.